Thanks everyone and welcome to the AGM. It being 5:30, I declare the meeting open. For those who don't know me, I'm Angelo Gabrielatis. I'm the chairperson of the Committee of Management of Apheda. Welcome, welcome, and it's good to see you here. So many friendly faces, good comrades and friends joining together for us to take stock of the year 2017 as far as Apheda is concerned. Getting started, there are a number of attendance sheets that are on the table. Please sign on. It's important for us to keep a record of all those in attendance. For those on the periphery, please squeeze in. There's always room. Please squeeze in. Please squeeze in. Thank you very much. So again, please, if everyone can sign on, so that we have a true and accurate record of those who are present. In terms of apologies for this meeting, we have 62 apologies, and I do not intend to read each of them out unless I'm seeking the indulgence of the floor not to read them all out, but should the floor so decide, I will read them all out. So thank you for your indulgence. There are 62 apologies here and they're available. The list is available for anyone to see. Andrew Detmar moves acceptance of those apologies and it's been seconded by Michelle. I'm sorry. Pardon me, Jennifer, an oversight on my part. Are there any other apologies in addition to the 62? Peter Whitesell. Samuel. Yep, Peter Whitesell. Are there any other apologies? So 62 plus Peter are our apologies. Andrew's moved that those apologies be accepted. It's been seconded by Michelle. All those in favour, against, carried. Thank you very much. I draw to your attention the minutes of last year's AGM. I'm sure you've all had a chance to look at them. I need someone who was present at the AGM last year to move that they are a true and accurate record. Moved Michelle, seconded by... Okay. Danny. Sorry, Danny. Seconded by Danny. All those in favour, against, carried. There's no business arising. Correspondence, there is no correspondence for us to consider before the AGM, which brings us to the reports, presentation of reports. I'm going to, one apology that I am going to mention, not to embarrass him, but it's important that I do so in terms of this item of the business. Mark Lennon, who is the Treasurer of the Committee of Management, cannot be here this afternoon, and Mark would normally introduce, offer the Treasurer's report, but I'm going to hand over to Kate to introduce the Treasurer's report and also introduce James, our accountant, to speak to the Treasurer's report briefly. So Kate, over to you.
Okay. I'd like to just draw your attention to a couple of documents in your folder. I'm going to hand over to James in a minute, but I'm going to be referring to the audited accounts, which look like this. And I'm going to just highlight a couple of issues, and then I'm going to hand over to James Winter from Grant & Thornton, who is our accountant. So the first note to draw your attention to is on page 5. Now you might look at what looks like a deficit of $668,000 and be terrified, but I want to assure you that that is not an entirely accurate reflection, if you know what I mean, and James can explain more. But the key pages that James will refer to are from pages 16, 17 and 18, which show the statements related to our two accounts. One is our account that runs our operations in Australia, and the other one is our account that runs our international work. And so I draw your attention to note 15 on page 17, which shows the general account, which is at note 15, has a deficit of $89,000. This is mainly due to the income of $53,000 for one of our major program in Palestine. Income into that project was recognised in the 2015-16 financial year. So that makes up the bulk of that that deficit. And then on note 16, on pages 17 and 18, so note 16 flows across pages 17 and 18, which shows you a deficit in the projects account of $579,000. What that means is that we actually spent $579,000 more in project expenses than we received in the year, but as of the 30th of June this year, our project account was still holding $3.5 million in cash that is in the process of being spent. So just to explain, what looks like significant deficits are about movements of money between years. Our net reserves, our net assets and reserves stand at 3.3 million, of which 1.1 million is a reserve in the general for the general account, which runs the operations in Australia. So I'll just hand over to James now, who might want to give you a brief further explanation and then answer any questions that you might have.
Thanks, Kate. I'm happy to take questions through the chair once I've completed speaking. So, as Kate quite rightly said, what you've got to do is the abbreviated annual report, which is the glossy document, and the detailed financial statements. And the reason for having both sets of reports is that the detailed financial statements are lodged with the ACNC. Also go to fair trading, but ACNC is the major reporting body as a recipient of charitable sets of financial statements, and that's been the case since 2013. So the accounts are prepared in accordance with the Associations and Corporations Act under New South Wales, in accordance with charitable fundraising requirements in the relevant states, in accordance with the ACNC Act, as I've said, and also in accordance with the Apheda guidelines, which are to do with overseas aid organisations who apply and apply to those principles which are accreditation under Apheda. So we're the auditors, so we've conducted and completed our audit report, which is in the document. So again, talking to Kate comments, the preparation of the accounts for a charitable organisation like yours is that because of the accounting standards which effectively require you to account for your disbursements and income on a cash basis, that where you receive cash in one year and you spend it in another, then there's not a matching principle. But what you're showing is that your funds dispersed this year, as Kate's described, again, deliberate expenditure plans around the funding which are going to your project. So the fact that you've spent more than you've received is only an indication of timing. It's not an indication of performance. One of the key things that Kate did refer to is that in terms of your balance sheet position, where in fact there is deferred revenue of 1.5 million, which is deferrable, what we call income in advance, which is deferred. So if you look at your current that operating position on page 5 of the detailed accounts of 668 deficit, in addition to that there's 1.5 which is deferred, because that's monies which is earmarked for a specific project, and it's tied. So that money will be sent in subsequent years. So in terms of the presentation, as Kate also described it, she referred to those two specific notes towards the back of the document, which was notes 15 and 16. I mean, I think that particularly in note 15, which covers and includes most of the administrative expenditure there, what you're doing is effectively breaking even on that operating account, which makes sense, and then on the project account, whatever money's in is going out. So that, again, that's sound a presentation. In terms of the process and the quality of the information from an audit perspective, we reported through to the board, and we were very comfortable with the processes and the presentation of the quality of information, the documentation supporting the presentation of the financial statements, and them being in accordance with the required statutory obligations of the organisation. So I guess I don't propose really to say any more. Kate's mentioned it. The deficit is not a negative thing, it's just a timing thing, and this project expenditure, which is what you're trying to maximise to make effect for the intentions of what Apheda is trying to do in terms of your projects. The balance sheet Kate did refer to, there is cash which is held there, but that is cash which is largely earmarked for some of that's funds received in advance, and then the accumulated funds, it's certainly split between general funds and project funds. So there's a large proportion of the cash which is held, which is either received in advance or earmarked for projects. So I guess what we're saying is that as much of the funds which is received is going towards specific projects, and that's what we're seeing through the audit process as well. I guess I'm happy to leave it there and to take any questions through the chair.
Thanks, James. So before we go any further, Francis moves reception of the report and has been seconded by Peter Murphy. All those in favour? Against? Carried. Are there any questions of James and Kate with respect to the financial report? There is one. Julie.
Thank you, Angelo. On page number 17, the provision for long service leave and annual leave is amended.
That's just a movement number. So that's a P&L adjustment. That's not the full provision. So where the provision goes up or goes down, and there'll be some of those the provision movements will not through payroll. So that's just a movement in the reserve. So that's not the full reserve is fully accounted for.
Thank you. Further questions? Yes, I'm sorry, I don't know your name.
Mike.
Thanks, Mike.
Just to the community education has gone up significantly from 20,000 to 199,000. Just interested to have some feedback on that as to what the focus of that was and if that was a very conscious decision for that to occur.
What page or what note?
Well, it's under the page 5. It's under the disbursements, and you've got community education under disbursements. Third from the bottom, 2017, 199,272, 216 comparative, $20,047.
Maybe I'll answer that. So Corinne and I, Corinne, which is our quality programs coordinator, we work we look into Apheda guidelines on how to allocate expenses into the different areas. We look at it carefully, and then the prior year, we kind of just followed what was done prior years, and then we look into the guidelines into more recent year and try to readjust how we break up and reallocate our expenses. And we thought it's more appropriate to allocate more money into community education to reflect the times that we spend on that. Yeah. Is that right?
So it's a more accurate reporting of activities that would come under that bailiwick that has resulted in that shift. And let me introduce Lois, the Chief Financial Officer of Apheda. Thanks, Lois. Mike, is that okay, or do you want to...
So would that be, for example, like wages, for example, of work that people were spending doing that work of community education being taken from administrative more to...
Yes.
Yeah, okay. No, I'd support that actually, because I think that's valid. Just a supplementary question. Is there there's always a debate about the percentage on administrative comparative to funding of projects and that. Is there a guideline that you operate on, or is that just what dependent on what happens from year to year?
We'll ask Kate to finish
Thank you.
that.
Look, if I could, in brief, give an answer to that. We're an accredited aid agency of for the Australian Government for the delivery of overseas aid, and there are guidelines in the process where we're also subject to a code of conduct, and there are certainly guidelines there. And in this document here, the annual report, we've tried to give a graphic representation of the breakdown in this middle graph right at the back of expenditure between programs, fundraising and operating expenses, which is an attempt to show that 89% of our funding goes towards international overseas work. When we have done comparisons, we haven't done it this year, but in previous years we've done a comparison between ourselves and other major international organisations, and by far we, I guess, exceed other organisations in the proportion of funding we send overseas. So we more than meet any guidelines from Apheda.
Yes, further questions?
Darren McDonald. Just looking at the bottom line in terms of payments, and which takes it from 1st of July 15.
So which page, Darren?
7. Takes it from 1st of July 15. been through the first of June 2017, and I know the accumulated funds has fallen for both of those years. I'm just wondering how you see that. It strikes me it's not necessarily a bad thing. I'm just interested in how the committee sees that, as whether that's a good thing, a bad thing, or a neutral thing that accumulated funds has fallen. Obviously, presumably, the government makes it and they do nothing. But it's interesting how you see that.
I think that represents also a greater expenditure of our funds that are held in the international programs account. The staff and the board have, I mean, there are times when money's raised, there are obstacles that occur in the attempts to spend them through our relationships with partner organisations or their capacity to spend as fast as they would like to. We've made very deliberate attempts this year to escalate, you know, the job that we're meant to do, and that is that spend the money that's raised here internationally in a timely fashion. So I'm thinking that that represents a greater expenditure.
Yeah, just supplementary to that, what is pertinent also is that, as I said before, there is $1.5 million which is effectively sitting in liabilities in that cash fund. So as that, from accounting speak, comes back into income in this next year, some of that expenditure will offset. So I guess that to the extent to which that reduces your net funds, well, it will see that there's a bit of a correction, if you will, because of the timing of that income offsetting against the expenditure. So that'll happen in the current year, that $1.5 million that year.
Any further questions? There being no further questions, Julie Rice moves adoption of that report, and it's been seconded by Darren McDonald. All those in favour? Against? Carried. Thank you very much, and thank you also to James and our accountant, Grant Thornton, for the work that they do for us. It's always great to have you looking after our books, James, and returning good reports whenever our books are submitted. So thanks very much. I'm going to again. I'm going to ask for your indulgence. We would normally move now on to my report and the Executive Officer's report, but we have someone on standby, Elizabeth Tang. She's on standby via Skype in Manila to speak with us about the work that's happening around the world on migrant workers and winning equal rights and justice. And in the interest of not having her wait on for us to engage in our deliberations, as we will, I'm suggesting that we move to that item on the agenda to hear from Elizabeth about the wonderful work that's happening and that she's working on, and then come back to those items on the agenda. So if there's no disagreement, we'll switch over, and I'm going to hand over to Kate to introduce Elizabeth this item and also a special video message as well.
Okay, thanks, Angelo. So yes, we have, as we advised in our notice of the meeting, our panel discussion at this AGM will be around issues facing migrant workers around the world, particularly in our region also. So we have Elizabeth Tang online on Skype, ready to join us, and we also have a video message from Sharon Burrow, the General Secretary of the ITUC, and we all know Sharon, being an Australian and former President of the ACTU as well. So I'm just going to see if I can get Elizabeth online, because I don't want to keep her waiting, so if you could just bear with us a moment, we will do that. And I'll also just give you a brief introduction to Elizabeth as well. So Elizabeth. Elizabeth is the General Secretary of the International Domestic Workers Federation. This is a new global union established in 2006 when unions from a handful of countries came together to build a strong international union for domestic workers. So in 2009, the union was formally established, and its key campaign has been to to campaign for the ILO to introduce a new convention in relation to decent work for domestic workers. In 2012, 12 countries ratified Convention 189 to that effect. The ILO adopted Convention 189 in 2011, the International Domestic Workers Union now has members in 56 countries, I think. 25 countries, and 25 countries have ratified the Domestic Workers Convention. Domestic workers are overwhelmingly migrant women, and often have low education, not always. Obviously, aren't part of the formal economy, have are vulnerable workers certainly. And we've seen an example only 2 weeks ago where an Indian woman was enslaved by a family in Melbourne for a number of years, not paid, and unable to obviously exercise any power in that situation. They are organising and also getting more rights. So let me just see if Elizabeth is here now, and we can speak with her. Oops. Sorry, it's a bit noisy.
Hello.
Hello, hey. Elizabeth. I'll just see if I can bring you on video. Hi. Can you see me?
Yes.
Yes. Oh, we can see you.
The technology works.
Okay.
Oh, no.
Hello. Good morning.
Hello. Now, I'm not going to risk being able to show you the room, but we have a room here of about 20 people, or a bit more, 30 people. 30 of our members here who are all very keen to hear from you today. And you and I have already discussed some of the themes for our discussion today, and while before I Skyped you, I did a brief introduction, not doing at all justice to the work you've been doing and to you. So I'll hand over to you, and we're looking forward to hearing from you today. Thanks so much for joining us, Elizabeth.
Okay, thank you, Kate.
Yeah.
Thank you. Good morning. I'm Elizabeth. I'm the General Secretary of the International Domestic Workers Federation. This is a very young federation. We are just about 4 years old. But today we have 65 affiliates, all are domestic workers organizations in 53 countries. And we represent over 500,000 domestic workers. As you all know, domestic work is considered as women's work. It is invisible, undervalued, and domestic workers are not considered as workers in many places of the world. And unfortunately, especially in our part of the world, in many Asian countries, we just consider domestic work not work. But we believe through organizing, we will build power to change our realities, and we will achieve and gender equality. So today I will focus on the realities in our region, the Asian Pacific. When we talk about domestic workers, Asian Pacific is a very important region. There are 67 million domestic workers globally, but 42% are in this region. So when we look at the international migrant domestic worker sectors specifically, again, the East and Southeast Asia is the largest host, with a total number of over 3.5 million. And that is only about those who are documented. Remember, there are a lot who go around without documents. So I guess the real number will be about 4 million. And most of them are in Malaysia, Hong Kong, where I'm based, Singapore, and Taiwan, and South Korea. Unfortunately, our region does not treat migrant domestic workers as workers. they don't have rights. And with the exception of Hong Kong, in all these countries I have mentioned, to organize, to form trade unions of their own choice is not considered to be legal. It's illegal to do this. And even worse, in some places their movement is restricted because they are mandated to live with their employers. And again, with the exception in Hong Kong, these migrant domestic workers do not have minimum wage protections. And if it is there, it is very low, as low as about $200 a month. There is no working hours limitation, and most of them work between 14 to 18, and some even say 20 hours a day, and they work 7 days a week without holiday. Nevertheless, migrant domestic workers are trying to overcome these challenges, to overcome isolation. They are trying to organize. In Malaysia, in Macau, Singapore, they have formed organizations which are called network or just organizations, because they are not allowed to form trade unions. And if they have not succeeded, they are still trying, and wherever possible and whenever possible. So actually, I'm not in the office now. I'm not in Hong Kong. I'm in Manila at this time. In the past 5 days, we have been running a leadership workshop for 17 Filipino domestic workers who are working in Hong Kong, Macau, Malaysia, and Singapore. So we have brought them together in the last 5 days to do an intensive leadership training course, because we want them to become more effective so that when they go back to their countries, they can continue to strengthen their organizations, and they will also continue to support each other. And together we have made a goal to create an International Federation of Filipino Domestic Workers Federation in 3 years' time or 4 years' time. And lucky enough, we have got support from the German Trade Union Confederation, the DGB, and also the Trade Union Federation in the Philippines, Central, and the labor NGO Learn to do the training to support these activities. And you will be really inspired by this group of leaders. Today is the last day of our training, but everybody is still full of energy. It's like, you know, today is the first day. Because they find the future is so hopeful, and I'm very much inspired by them, and I also feel, you know, our future is so hopeful. Done and have to be done. And of course, the very first step all the governments must do is to give basic labor rights protections and also make migration safe. And a small good news that happened in the end of October, this October, in the Philippines. The ASEAN governments came together and held the 10th ASEAN Forum on Migrant Labor. And
just going to turn the video off.
And the conclusion is very, very important because all the governments are pledged to continue and to start putting more effort to protect the rights and to promote the welfare of domestic workers with a will to adopt the Convention 189 in their countries. So let us hold on to this and hold our government accountable to what they have pledged at this regional platform. And because the Convention 189 so far has only been ratified in the Philippines in this region, no other government has done it. And this is totally unacceptable because of the large number of domestic workers in this region. And as a trade union, as civil societies, we have to keep the pressure on and make our government ratify the convention and adopt labor rights legal protection of domestic work. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Elizabeth. You know, there's no doubt that the development of and the establishment of this union in the last few years has been fantastic. So much needed for decades, and as you say, bringing invisible work out into the open with the hope of regulating it, with the hope of bringing it into the formal economy, and with very good organising results so far. If you've got time, and I don't know if you do, maybe we'll just take maybe 1 or 2 questions if there are any from the audience. Would you have a couple of minutes more to spare? Tell us if you have to.
Yes. Okay. About a few minutes.
Okay. If there's 1 or 2 questions, I've got one from Jennifer and one from Tom. So Jennifer, you might have to speak up or relay it through me.
Yeah. I would be interested to know, when you talk about domestic workers in this region, are they women who are from this region working in other areas of the world, or are they actually working in the Asia Pacific region?
Okay. Did you hear that question, or should I repeat it?
No, not really.
Okay, all right. Jennifer's question was, when we talk about domestic workers in the Asia Pacific region, are they predominantly from the region, or are they, I guess your question is, what are the flows of labour?
Where are they going to work?
Where are they going to work? Are they going to work within the Asia region, or are they leaving the region?
Yes, they are. Actually, these international migrant domestic workers are intra-regional migrant domestic workers. So most of them are from the Philippines and Indonesia. We are talking about 200,000 a year. Leaving their countries to work as domestic workers in the countries which are in the Asian Pacific regions. So although there are also many who migrate to the Arab states, going even to Europe, but a majority stay in the regions.
Okay, all right. Thanks, Jennifer. Tom?
As someone who works for Union Aid Abroad with informal sector workers in Thailand and Myanmar, I know that a real challenge is finding the time to get face time with the domestic workers or informal sector workers. And you were talking about how often workers are working 7 days a week, sometimes as much as 20 hours a day. I'm interested to know, what are the strategies you use to make contact with these workers, to speak to them about the union and talk about what it means to be union, to get them into the fold?
Yes, good question. Fortunately,
You're on to us.
Rest. So we start with.
Doing so well.
Yeah, we were doing so well. I'll just see if she comes back, but if not, then...
Tom, that's the $1 million question.
Sam.
I'll just try one more time, and if we can connect, we will. If we can't, we'll move on.
Hello?
Hello, hi.
Hi. Hey, Kate. Yes. I think it's better without camera.
Yes, okay, all right. So we're just at that last question. If you can start again, we lost you. Thank you.
Okay. Yes. To Tom's question, yeah, I want to say, fortunately, there are individual good employers who allow their
I'm sure I can work that terrible.
domestic them to training, and then they go back to where they work, and then they when they meet other domestic workers, and then one by one. For example, one of the leaders who shared her stories with me, and is very, very inspiring. She said that she went down to the lower floor, rang the bell to pass on some stuff to the domestic workers working there, because she was never allowed to go out. But then, and when the door was open, the employer was curious, you know, why she was able to go, and she said, yes, my employer allowed also to allow her 2 days. So in these 2 days a month, then her domestic work also started to join the training, the group activities. So one by one and day by day, we are able to build the group, and the group is expanding. So I mean.
Okay. We might have to leave that.
Yes. Don't worry, I'll follow her up.
Okay, I think the lesson that we heard was that it was one by one, the hard yakka.
Day by day.
Okay, all right, we might leave it there. I forgot to mention at the beginning, some of you know this, but Elizabeth is the former General Secretary of the Hong Kong Council of Trade Unions before she agreed to take up this role as the head of the new Domestic Workers Federation. Thank you and goodbye. Okay. So we'll leave that presentation there. Now we just have a short video from Sharon Burrow, who is going to also update us on the ITC's campaign work in this area, and particularly the significant wins in the Qatar campaign from a couple of months ago. So,
hello, Apheda.
Oh, she's right on.
Great to see Apheda still going strong. When we look at the countries that you've been involved with in solidarity around the world, they still need your support. The optimism, of course, in Zimbabwe to free the people from the dictatorship of Mugabe. The situation in Vietnam, both optimistic and indeed sometimes pessimistic as well. The Cambodian environment where, frankly, we're again seeing an emergence of dictatorship, and many more. There's no doubt that our world is under attack. We are seeing shrinking democratic space, attacks on fundamental rights everywhere. Freedom of association is something that too many governments simply don't want to uphold, and companies deny in the quest for corporate greed. But at the heart of all of this, there is an increasing xenophobia, an increasing racism that's often generated by the very leaders who are elected in democracies, or indeed the dictators from either democratically elected country bases or self-appointed. We know that migrants make up our economies. They are the 5th largest economy in the world if they were grouped together. They keep, in fact, our societies going. Most of us in countries like Australia, in Canada, in the US, in the UK, and many, many other places, simply wouldn't have the workforce we need without migrant workers. And when we have historic levels of displacement of people, the refugees flooding across the world, facing unbelievable discrimination then something is very, very wrong with our world. It's very easy for us to say what we believe. Refugees have a right to settlement, they have a right to work, and they have a right to equal treatment. It's much harder for us to see justice on the basis of those principles everywhere right now. And of course, I'm ashamed about what's going on in Australia with the absolute unfinished business, the evil in which we are treating other human beings, particularly, of course, those on Manus Island, but everywhere. If Australia can't accommodate a few thousand refugees coming by unorthodox means, as much as we don't like people trafficking, then what are we saying to people who are fleeing from desperation? What are we saying about the generosity of Australia? You know the answer. It's not pretty. So we have to fight. Indeed, many of our migrant workers are now ending up in conditions of modern slavery. And the one good piece of news I can tell you from the last couple of months is that we have cut a deal, A to Z, with Qatar. I want to thank you. A 5-year campaign, but it shows you what the union movement can do. Because if we don't stand against slavery, who will? Almost 2 million migrants in Qatar will no longer be enslaved. Within months, the exit visa will be gone. They will actually have the right to leave the country freely. Because we know there are scurrilous employers, then indeed there will be a government fund to support unpaid wages and indeed the tickets home that people are entitled to by contract. We will have a situation where contracts will be registered on a government site, transparent, therefore avoiding substitution. We will have a minimum wage. There's a temporary minimum wage, it's not enough, but with evidence we will see that raised so we can end the discrimination of an apartheid set of wages. And of course, with many other commitments, including domestic workers being in the frame of a technical agreement, a 3-year technical agreement with the ILO, we will see an ILO office in the country monitoring a complaints process. This is an outcome we can feel proud of. And again, I simply say thank you for your solidarity. We will still be there. We will issue our own progress report. From time to time, we will still ask you to make commentary. But now we will move this campaign, this element of our Eliminating Slavery campaign, to in fact Saudi Arabia and the UAE. We must clean up the Gulf states. These will be big challenges. We'll need you on board, but I know you will be there. Indeed, one of the things that's come out of this is that we have also built a global architecture for rights associated with mega sporting events. It is in fact a partnership across NGOs, the UN Human Rights Office, and indeed the ILO, with the IOC and FIFA and other sporting bodies. It will assess bids for law and practice, and it will help clean up supply chains for successful event hosts. There's no doubt that we have made a lot of gains out of this, and we're even seeing FIFA, not satisfactorily yet, but looking to its own human rights policy. We have to keep up the pressure, but this has been a great union campaign and will continue to do so, just with other areas of focus. And finally, let me tell you, an idea that arose in part from consultations in Australia. We are going to release this month the recruitment advisor. I fondly call it a trip advisor for migrant workers. Not that you would in fact want to go to many of these places, but it will allow migrant workers to talk to each other, to rate their agencies, their employers, and to call for help, anonymously if they need to, or collectively where in fact we can make a difference. So watch this space, please promote it, and keep doing, Apheda, what you do. Migrant workers, refugees, those in modern slavery, they're our brothers and sisters, and they're entitled to fundamental rights, to dignity, to respect. Thank you for everything you do.
We have some lights.
Yes.
Well, in absentia, thank you, Elizabeth, and thank you, Sharon, for those very important presentations. Very important presentations. That leads us into my report, and I want to start off by drawing your attention to the annual report, a copy of which you all have. Before I go any further though, I want to put on public record on behalf of the community management our appreciation to Kate and all the officers, staff of Apheda for the wonderful work that they do on a daily basis. Wonderful work. If you look at page 4 of the annual report, you'll see in nice diagrammatical fashion a little overview of what Apheda is. 34 staff, 7 officers around the world, administering, running, overseeing 50 projects in 18 countries. That is a huge effort, a huge effort. And that's why we always say that Apheda Union Aid Abroad is a source of pride for the union movement, the Australian union movement. It's recognised not only in within our shores, but beyond our shores as well, in terms of the work that is being done by this small staff running very important programs right around the world. I think the presentations by Elizabeth and Sharon provide a lot of food for thought. It's a cruel world out there. It's a cruel world out there. The workers in the informal sector continue on a daily basis to be exploited in ways that we can't even imagine. We often hear about it, but we can't imagine the pain that they suffer every single minute of the day. The work that's being done by Elizabeth and her team is good work. It's important work. The work that Sharon spoke about in terms of the ITUC is good work, it's important work. The achievement in terms of that outcome in Qatar cannot be overstated. It is an incredible achievement, and it will impact beyond Qatar right across the Gulf, and it has to. This year, for reasons that are unimportant, I had cause to go to Nepal twice and the Philippines twice. And on both occasions, I went there via the Arab states, the United Arab Emirates. One's from Dubai, one's from Doha. And I went back after each of those trips. It is an incredible sight to see the hundreds, thousands of Filipinos, Nepalis, being herded in their airports with the papers of their recruitment agent in hand and little else, going to the the Gulf states to be exploited in conditions that I again say to you are unimaginable. Working in excessive heat with few breaks, little sustenance, being treated as nothing more than slaves. So the achievement in Qatar is significant. The work in the informal sector is significant. And the work that Apheda is doing in our own small way in those 18 locations is contributing to creating a better world. Our work is most effective when we organise. When we organise and build movements. In our area of work, in our world, we don't organise events, we organise movements. Sustainable movements to effect sustainable change around the world. To make the world a bit better for the millions for whom, or the millions who don't have a voice. Of course, what happens in every part of the world is important because it does contribute to the creation of a floor, and a floor from which you can campaign and build and go become stronger. The campaigns that we run in Australia are vitally important in establishing those floors upon which we can then reflect and build in order to achieve betterments around the world. The world has never been more fragile. It's a scary place. It's not only, and regrettably, it's not only scary for those millions of slaves that Sharon spoke about, millions of those in the informal sector. It's becoming a bit scarier for everyone around the world. We have an absolute lunatic who is holding us all at ransom, holding world peace at ransom. And we never know what his next move will be in terms of the destabilisation he's creating and in terms of world peace. Never in our recent history, and certainly in the last 4 or 5 decades, has the world been so close to catastrophic outcomes courtesy of one individual lunatic as he is. It's not only world peace that he's putting at risk, but also the very existence of the world and the barbaric behaviour in terms of climate change and what needs to be done to save the planet. We've got a big task ahead of us, and Apheda will continue in our own small yet special way to contribute to building movement, to organising, and hopefully making this world a bit better, a better place for everyone to live in. But let's start off with those millions in the informal sector and those millions enslaved. Let's start off with them, and then we'll grow the movement even bigger, stronger, further and higher to achieve a better place for all of us. Thank you. At this point, I'll hand over to Kate.
Okay, thank you, Angelo. So just in brief, a report from me. Happy to answer any questions as well. There is a short, brief report from me in this document, and what we've tried to do is capture just some key projects and key issues in our report. But of course it doesn't do justice to everything and to all of our partner unions internationally and partner community organisations. And one of the things we're trying to do, and I know all of you as members would be receiving our monthly e-news that we send out in the last week of every month. If you're not, please see us before you leave. But what we try to do is feature project work reporting through that monthly communication channel, and we're aiming to cover every single project that is funded through Apheda during the course of 1 year cycle. So that's become an important reporting mechanism now to us, from us to members, to all of you and beyond, and that's our key channel in which we're reporting the work of the organisation. Of course, we're active in social media, which is another way to give people more timely updates of key campaigns as we go along. But I'd like to just start by focusing on a few key things. We are refocusing our work over time towards 4 key priority themes. Trade union building and workers' rights, women's rights and feminist movement building, migrant worker and refugee rights, and that was a theme of tonight's discussion obviously, and climate justice, energy democracy and just transition. Those 4 areas are priority areas because they give us firstly very good opportunities to connect to debates in the Australian Union movement. They're all live issues and ways in which we can connect to our movement here. They're also key issues in our region for a whole range of reasons, some of which you've heard tonight. And they also are intimately connected to each other. So for example, we know that the crisis around climate change also has driven, has been one driving factor for conflict in the Middle East. And that has driven, refugees and, obviously the war in Syria and the refugee, huge refugee outflows coming from that. And similarly, we know that migrant workers, as Elizabeth said, many workers in the informal economy are often women and massively exploited. So we're also looking for ways in which these issues are interconnected and ways in which we can connect them for the Australian Union movement. I'd like to thank all members. Some of obviously are here tonight, but all members around the country, and we also have some members internationally who support the work both by contributing monthly but also are active in our campaigns and work. I'd also like to thank our activist groups that exist in most capital cities around the country. They do incredible work raising money, holding fundraisers, but also hosting international guests when we have guest speakers on speaking tours, and are also active in promoting campaigns. And I'm pleased to say we're going to have our first ever National Activist Conference early next year, bringing together people from key activist groups around the country to plan together in ways that they can both support our priority campaign on asbestos, but also help us build the membership base, bigger membership base, and meet our goals around membership. So that's an exciting initiative linked to our activists. Of course, I want to thank our Governing Management Committee. Of course, Angelo, as our chair, is so solidly there in support of Union Aid Abroad. And he promotes us and is proud of us internationally, and that means a lot to all of us. All of our other board members are listed in the report, but some are here tonight. Andrew Detmar from the AMWU, Michelle Robertson from the Services Union in Queensland, and also representing our activist group in Queensland. We have a new member of our board joining us tonight, Frances Collins, and Betty Hounslow, who also sits as an expert group. Marge O'Callaghan is also a member of our board from United Voice, here based in Sydney. And some of our other board members weren't able to be here tonight and sent apologies. Of course, I'd also like to echo Angelo's thanks to our staff. All of our Australia-based staff are here tonight, but we also have two of our staff who happen to be here from Hanoi. Soren KC, our Mekong Regional Manager, and Neil. Where's Neil? Is he here?
Yes.
Yeah, Neil. So if you want to get a rapid update on the situation in Vietnam, then make a beeline for those two at the end. There is much to report about our program work, but I won't do that in the interest of time, and we've got some other important things to do tonight. But just to highlight a couple of things, we're very excited that we're forged a new partnership with the Dutch, the equivalent of our sister organisation for the Dutch, one of the Dutch trade union centres, FNV. We'll be working together to expand an exciting program of work in Myanmar, which, as I think many of you know, has only been able to legally form trade unions in the last 5 years. So that will be working with workers who work as home-based workers in the informal economy in the garment industry, and we're really excited that that's going to kick off this year. And we've just appointed a senior person to lead that work in Myanmar, and she will be starting in March, and that's an exciting thing. She's an experienced person who comes from working with one of the global union federations in the Asia Pacific region. We're also pleased to assist the ACTU and the VGCL, the Vietnam General Congress of Labour, I think, Council of Labour, on a new phase of cooperation as the VGCL commits to a reform program as it moves towards signing ILO Conventions 87 and 98. And last year, the ACTU led a delegation headed by Andrew Detmar on behalf of the ACTU, visited the VGCL last November, and there's been further cooperation between our two national centres, and our staff based in Vietnam was able to assist that. So I might just stop there. Again, I'd like to thank all unions as well. And we're very pleased to see both the union sponsorship to our international program increasing, And union members, our membership, individual members, is increasing every month this year, both in numbers and our the money that is donated to Apheda through individual membership. So they're two wonderful trends that we plan to continue next year. So thank you everybody for all your support during the year. Thanks, Angela.
Thanks, Kate. So Marjorie moves reception of both of those reports. It's been they're seconded by Paul, putting all those in favour, against carried. Thanks very much. That takes us on to item number 7, the election of the 4 community members to the Committee of Management. This year, of course, was an election year for those 4 community members on the Committee of Membership Management. Sorry about this, it's an interesting constitution. But congratulations on being elected, Janet Giles from South Australia, Michelle Robertson, Queensland, Marjo Callahan and Frances Collins. Congratulations for being elected as the community members on the Committee of Management of the Apheda board. A round of applause to them. Thank you very much, which brings us now to the next item of business, and that's the presentation of a couple of awards. I'm going to start off with the winner of the Solidarity Award, Ruth Ellis. Unfortunately, Ruth can't be with us tonight. Ruth is from WA. Ruth's connection to Union Aid Abroad Apheda stretches back decades, first as a member, then as a volunteer, and now as an activist. She has a special connection with Vietnam after an initial visit she made to Hanoi in 2009. She knew she had to return, but it would take 5 years before she had an opportunity to do so. In 2014, Ruth made the journey back to Vietnam as part of the Australian Volunteer International program. She would go on to spend 2014 and 2015 as an English teacher trainer, and was joined by her partner Peter Stokes, who volunteered with Apheda's Hanoi office during the same period. Ruth also supported Apheda's work while in Vietnam, when in a personal visit to Korea in 2015 helped Laos and Vietnam link with the International Women's Development Agency. The friendships developed and partnerships Apheda has with projects in Vietnam inspired her to establish a greater sense of solidarity through the West Australian activist group upon her return. One of her first things was to organise the Apheda annual dinner in WA, and has continued to assist in doing so. This year she was elected as coordinator of the WA Apheda activist group and was the driver in establishing and enacting a 2017 action plan. You got to love those action plans. One of the actions involved a second annual dinner in October, which attracted more than 100 people, raised more than $8,400 and recruited 17 new members. You know, $8,400, a dinner doesn't sound like much, but when you operate on a budget, as we do, a dinner that brings in $8,400 is huge, huge. So well done. She's currently a member of the Union's WA International Committee, and in her role, together with her role as Apheda coordinator, she's worked with Unions WA and the Unions WA International Committee, of course, to progress our work. Those who have worked with Ruth describe her as honest, hard-working, selfless, committed, and truly a remarkable activist. And for being so, she gets this, which will be sent to her in due course. The second award that I want to go to tonight is the Cliff Dolan Award. This year, the Cliff Dolan Award is being bestowed upon Peter Jennings. It's hard not to say Apheda and think of Peter Jennings, synonymous. Peter Jennings began his long-term commitment to Union Aid Abroad Apheda in January 1988 when he was employed by Helen McHugh as the education officer. He came to Apheda as a committed activist for global justice, most notably in the Philippines, having lived in Mindanao for 10 years, closely experiencing the struggles for justice and equality in that country, where he also met his wife Tess. He joined a small team of staff, including Helen, Philip Hazelton, and Dorothy Ingram. His brief was to educate this Australian Unionists on understanding development issues and the rights of refugees and Apheda's work in supporting liberation movements. It was in the middle of the Hawke government that Apheda received strong support from Foreign Minister Bill Hayden and later Gareth Evans. It was also a period of increasing financial support from unions, which helped shape Apheda. Peter was a crucial part of a small Apheda team during the late 80s and through the 1990s when he moved into the role of fundraising officer. At this time, Apheda's funding was in some years more than 90% sourced from government aid program grants. Peter's job was to start turning that around so we would become less reliant on government sourced program grants. He had to build the funding base from within the trade union movement through credit card and payroll deductions from supporters, and to build connections between trade unions and individual projects through the Skillinks program. In 2002, Peter took on the role of executive officer. As the executive officer, Peter oversaw the coordination of the Australian trade union movement's response to Aceh after it was devastated by the Christmas 2004 tsunami. As Peter says in our book, the sheer extent of the devastation, the sheer extent of the suffering was just unbelievable. Apheda started rebuilding projects, water sanitation, cleaning water wells, health schools training, as well as holding financial appeals where hundreds of thousands of dollars were raised to support reconstruction. And as in Timor-Leste, which I'll come to in a moment, in that era, anyone who visited Aceh knew the esteem with which Apheda was held because of our presence on the ground. Peter also oversaw the expansion of Apheda's efforts in Timor-Leste, which had begun in 1998. Under his watch, the focus in Timor was on collaborating with the Australian trade unions, particularly the CFMEU, in helping build a training centre to raise the dangers of asbestos in Timor and also train on OH&S. A range of development programs were consolidated, unions began to form, and Australian unions' links were strengthened. Australian unions, of course, importantly helped local unions negotiate the first labour code in Timor-Leste. The savage funding cuts experienced by Apheda under the Howard government were a significant challenge for the organisation and led to alternative fundraising responses, first by Philip Hazelton and then continued by Peter Jennings from 2002 onwards. These efforts to build an individual activist membership of Apheda and scale up union support continue today. Peter, of course, retired in 2013 from the executive officer position, but has continued to volunteer for Apheda. His leadership, loyalty and tireless commitment is recognised by us all, and today we award him the Cliff Dolan Award.
Photos, come on.
Yeah,
go. Unless it's on social media, it doesn't exist.
That's exactly right, we know that.
Okay, over here. Yes, that's me being bossy. I've learned something. Okay.
You learning to be bossy.
Yeah, exactly. From me.
As Kate knows only too well, once I get on my feet, you can't shut me up.
But I'm chairing.
Allow me 60 seconds.
But I'm chairing.
Okay. Thank you very much for this tremendous privilege, Kate, Angelo, and all the Committee of Management. It's a great privilege, and I'm very, very proud to receive this, even though there are many others who deserve it more than I. But my whole work, over 2 decades working at Union Aid Abroad Apheda, have been an unbelievable privilege, because Apheda, more than any other aid agency, I believe, understands the junction between workers' rights and development. You can't have one without the other. And the ACTU understood this when they established Union Aid Abroad Apheda, that unless working men and women are paid a just living wage, you will not have development in a community or in an organisation or in a workplace. They will not be able to feed their children the food they need for a nutritional life. They will not be able to afford a doctor or medicine when the kids get sick. They will not be able to afford to educate their kids unless they are receiving a just living wage. And they will only receive a just living wage if they have a strong trade union to fight for them. And so the union movement and Union Aid Abroad Apheda have lived by this belief for the last, 30, 35 years, that we need to strengthen trade unions so that workers in developing countries, families in developing countries, kids in developing countries can have a fair life. And so that's why I'm very proud to have worked for Apheda for over 2 decades, and I'm very, very proud to receive this award. Thank you.
On your feet.
That's pretty good, isn't it?
Yeah.
That makes you feel good.
That's the shortest speech he's ever given.
Thank you, Peter. Thank you, Peter. That's right. How do you follow that? With general business. There being no item of general business before the chair, we move on. The next item is the date of next AGM. It's proposed by Kate that the next AGM is on the 17th of December 2018. That's been seconded by Danny. Putting that, all those in favour, against, carried. Put it in your diaries now, 17th of December 2018. There's no other place where you'd rather be at 5:30. And
There's still some wine and beer.
there's still, I'm just being scripted here, there's still some wine and beer, and we still have time. Have a safe break for those of you who are having a break. Don't work too hard for those of you who are not having a break. Enjoy the festive period. Let's recharge the batteries and let's give them hell next year. Thanks very much.
Also a long term, I don't know whether